Welcome to Night Shift. It's been a shifty type of time period right now for everybody. I'm Eric Lopez alongside Kyle Nash. He's going to talk a little NFL draft, which is still going on literally as we're recording this show. Bryson Turner producing, co-hosting this show. Coming up, we're going to tell you about the NFL draft, what you might see from UCF standpoint the next couple of days of the NFL draft. Kyle will give us some thoughts there with Bryson. Then me and Bryce are going to break down a monster weekends in both baseball, softball. Softball, historic senior weekend against the three-time defending national champion Oklahoma Sooners. Me and Bryson will debate, is Oklahoma softball the biggest brand program in any sport that UCF has ever hosted? We'll get into that. Plus baseball, going hosting Cincinnati. Are they on to Cincinnati, as one former NFL coach once said? We'll talk Bearcats Knights, as well as a UCF team that made the NCAA tournament later on. We'll break it all down. Coming up on this edition of Night Shift, follow us on all social media platforms. And, of course, on blackandgoldbanneret.com, which right now you can find our articles on a lot of the UCF guys that might get drafted here in the NFL draft. Spoiler, no UCF guys in the first round. I know, no surprise. It's a shocker. Kyle, it's been a wacky first round, especially if you love quarterbacks. 6 quarterbacks taken in the first 12 picks. This is the longest draft without a defensive back getting drafted. The Eagles took a defensive back like in the 21st pick. Those are the narratives of the first round you're going to hear about. Doesn't really impact UCF in theory. But Kyle, what do you want? What are you looking forward to seeing the next 2 days from a UCF perspective?
Well, I'll say this. If you're looking for Javon Baker to stay in the state and end up in Jacksonville, the first round did affect you when they picked up Brian Thomas at the 23rd pick after trading back. Now, how I feel about that and how that goes, you can listen to it on the Duval Dive here upcoming soon, Bing, or also on the Jaguar Report, whatever they drop on that as well. But listen, there's a lot of the crazy movement for the quarterback action. You know, John Rice Plumlee picked an unfortunate year to come out to try to be a quarterback. I'll put it that way. A, B, for me, is as surprised as everybody seems to be, this is chalk from where I sit. We've been talking about in all of college football leading into this draft for the NFL, how rich this quarterback draft was going to be, and it delivered. I know there's some old hats out there, not mentioning any names, including the founder of the Black and Golden Banneret himself, being a stick in the mud, trying to say these quarterbacks are unexciting coming out of college this year. But
they're not exciting?
Listen, I did not. I can't ask. What? I can't ask the guy who's the managing editor of the site to take a drug test.
Well, we'll revisit that after we get done on the UCF portion. And by the way, in honor of the NFL draft, each of these segments are clocked. So this is a 15 to 20 minute segment. So after that clock hits, we're done with the segment. But continue.
Yeah. So I mean, all of that being said, for me, it was chalk. All 6 guys who I thought should. I don't necessarily think that everybody's an air quotes first round talent or a guaranteed success, but the teams that I felt like were going to pick a particular guy did, all except for one, with the Falcons doing what they did to Michael Penix. And I said it that way on purpose. Anyways, guys, yeah, a lot of fun there. And listen, we have some draft profiles for various UCF players that are expecting to at least sniff the draft by way of me, Bryson Turner, and Nick Porcelli. So check those out on the Black and Gold Banneret. Bing! Anyways, so yeah, let's who we starting with? What's the first guy?
Well, let me ask you this, guys, both of you. How many UCF players predict to me will get drafted the next couple days?
I'll say 2. I'll say 2. 2 of them are also guys we've happened to have featured in these. Of course, Bryson Turner previewed Javon Baker. Well, I previewed Tyson Grable. I think those 2 are the most likely to actually get drafted of the ones mentioned there. You know, Baker, he's just too fast and too good a route runner for somebody to have not paid attention to what he's doing. A lot of Jaguars and people actually, let's put it this way, the chances of him staying in the state aren't bad. They're just, like I said, a little worse with the drafting of Brian Thomas by the Jags earlier. But I think somebody's going to snag him, you know, just as there's been an odd UCF receiver here and there, I feel like, for the past 4 years that has made it to the NFL, and I think Javon Baker adds to those ranks, simply put. And Grable as an offensive lineman in a world where the NFL needs beef. Hell, professional football in general, including the UFL, needs beef at a premium. and guys aren't as quickly developed as they used to be because you can't hit in camps leading up to seasons anymore. So younger linemen in the league struggle to get up to speed fast. An intelligent guy and a former quarterback like Tylen Greenbull is, whose all of his air quotes weaknesses on whatever draft report you're reading, most of them get taken away with proper coaching and development. Listen, there's an opportunity for him to catch on late, let's say 6 or 7 draft pick, and make a squad and make a difference.
So you've got 2. I assume you have Baker going first, then Grable?
Yeah, I mean, both of them I feel like are going to be day 3. I said that early on, and Baker would go first. But some guys have had Javon Baker as high as a day 2 pick for wherever his destination may be.
Yeah,
Bryson, how do you feel about that?
I actually do agree with you on that. I think that Javon, despite the fact that one of my favorite NFL comedian content creators had JRP going number 1 overall, I laughed so hard at that. But I do think it's going to be 2. Javon and Tylen really, really put in the work over the course of this offseason. I honestly did not, when this season ended, I honestly did not expect any UCF players to be selected in the draft this year. I really did. But credit to Javon Baker and Tylen Grable. They worked their butt off over this offseason to get noticed by NFL scouts. And through the Senior Bowl and the Combine, they did it. They were able to to turn a lot of heads. And now here we are talking about them potentially getting selected, with Javon Baker potentially going day 2 in what is a very deep wide receiver class this year, which has seen Marvin Harrison Jr. go off the board, Rome Odunze. I'll be very interested to see which team could potentially select him because actually some of the earlier picks we've seen on round 1 could potentially affect Baker's career should he end up with a team. He's visited with the Patriots, who selected North Carolina's Drake May. He visited with the Vikings, who just drafted J.J. McCarthy. He also visited with a certain Atlanta team who of course just drafted Michael Penix and signed Kirk Cousins. But he could also potentially work with the likes of Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, and Brock Purdy. So
just don't give away your entire article, Bryson Turner. We want.
I'm not. I'm giving up
internet.com.
I'm not. I'm giving away Aaron Wilson's tweet. Is what I'm doing. So basically, with Javon Baker, I'm very interested to see where he ends up because he could easily go with one of the young upstart, a young rookie just like himself at the helm, or 3 of arguably the league's best passers to this point. And I think the work that he's really put in made it so that either prospect, I think, will be very exciting for him because he's a game changer of a wide receiver that, in a way that people have called him a hidden gem in this draft. And honestly, considering how deep it is, I can see why you would make that assessment. And I think your assessment on Tylen Grable has been spot on. I mean, he is fast for an offensive lineman. And I think if an all lineman is fast, not only just in general, but also in mind, that is certainly a type of reaction time that you want to have when you're trying to defend your quarterback in a league that, granted, really likes its quarterbacks. So.
And I know that old hat thought says that fast O linemen don't matter, but in a league, hell, in a sport where mobile quarterbacks are more and more a requirement, and screen passing and that kind of gadgetry for having versatile running backs and all that is more important now that your guys can get out there, your beef can get out there and get out in front of blocks.
Let me ask you both. Those are the 2 guys we think will get drafted, but that doesn't mean that will be the only UCF guys that end up at least on a practice squad, maybe signed as an unrestricted free agent. That's become a big deal. That will take place I believe Saturday after the draft ends. Give us some thoughts of some names that you think, okay, they're maybe not get drafted, but you think they might sign on with a team to maybe be on the practice squad, perhaps once they get to training camp and things like that.
Listen, don't rule out John Rice Plumlee sneaking his way somewhere just because he's that great of an athlete, okay? What I'd love to see personally is that he catches on somewhere and returns punts. I would lose my mind over that. I made a joke about that a while back, a couple off seasons. You guys might remember about him competing with Mikey Keene and me being at first unimpressed with his throwing ability. And obviously I eventually came around.
Do you think he could be a Denard Robinson? Remember Denard Robinson, who was a quarterback and then was with the Niners? He moved to running back position, but he things like that. He did some returns. He is an athlete. If he's willing to change positions, I could see an NFL team saying, let's see how this experiment works with him, maybe in the practice squad to do some different things.
I wouldn't make him a running back, but yeah, him.
No, not a running back.
Like people are trying to compare him to Taysom Hill. He's just not big enough. But yeah, I think. By the way, his durability and his general perception that he can't read defenses well enough are the two main things I think that are just full stop. That why it's not going to happen. That being said, sources tell me that there's interest in him from the Ravens, from Arizona, at least, loosely getting a look because of the connection of the mobility to their starters in Lamar Demetrius Jackson and Kyler Murray, of course. He can match that for sure as a potential third stringer.
Yeah, I mean, his potential for his experience as a wide receiver and quarterback, in my opinion, reminds me of a more athletic version of Julian Edelman. I remember seeing those plays that Bill Belichick would just whip out sometimes with Julian Edelman passing the ball, and it would always catch him. And I think that would be very interesting for a John Rice Plumlee to do. Say he catches on as a starting wide receiver, all of a sudden you could have either two potential quarterbacks on the field at once. So I think John Rice Plumlee will be a very interesting football player to monitor. And even if he doesn't work out at the NFL level, I think that he would be a very good candidate for the UFL to potentially try.
Oh, yeah. Listen, you're going to be watching him pad up and getting paid to do it at some point. I think the UFL would be foolish to pass up on him. But I mean, listen, and I know it's kind of a harsh take, but I think Jason Johnson just does not have the size as a linebacker. Maybe he catches on in the UFL. Maybe he gets UFA just for something to get a look, but I don't see him making a roster. For me, I think he's one of the weaker prospects to get this far that we've seen in a while.
Well, I mean, arena football is coming back now, so.
I mean, I don't think the check's clear on that league. We haven't been.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to go with you. How the money on that, Bryson Turner?
Maybe CFL. Go Canada. Oh, Canada. Maybe that's still there.
That worked for Sam Jack. He's officially a Red Black now. So there you go.
All right. So that takes care of the players on this year's draft. Right.
Well, is there anyone we're missing?
Is Alec Holler. Like, as somebody in a world where tight ends block less and less, Alec Holler may be a little undersized for the job, but he's a dude that will hit a dude and still make a play. I don't know if he's fast enough. I don't know if he has all the physical attributes. Maybe he'll catch on in the spring league as well. But I mean, there's certainly a consideration to at least note that he's a guy that's interesting. I don't think he's going to get UFA'd at the UFL, but you may see time again in some other form of football.
All right. Let me ask you this. I want to ask you, I'm kind of curious because Bo Nix went in the first round.
Mm-hmm.
Gus Malzahn recruited and coached Bo Nix at Auburn. Michael Penix, the aforementioned Falcon pick. It's no secret. Gus went after him in the portal to try to bring him in here to UCF. Penix went to Washington, for example.
Runner-up champion, by the way, last year.
That's correct. When do you think we're close to a next UCF player to be drafted in the first round? Do you see it on this roster for this upcoming year, or you think we're a couple years away? I'm just kind of curious because, we had a little bit of a run there where we had guys drafted super early, but it's been kind of quiet for a little few years now. Are we close? We still not so sure. Where are we at that?
If you're looking for potential draftees to come out of this team, check that defensive tackle unit, guys. That's the guys who are just absolutely brutal and badass and taking care of their business. Not to take any away from anybody else. RJ Harvey, I'm sure, would be a popular answer for many. Maybe Kobe Hudson might get a look or two. It really depends on how they do in the coming season, to be honest, on that front. None of the offensive line is bad. They don't jump off the tape there for me to think of them as NFL prospects or any of that. And KJ Jefferson could, if he actually fixes his touch and gets a good year out here at UCF, get enough looks to at least get drafted. I'm not prepared to say that he's a lock for any of that though. That being, like I said, start at the defensive tackle room, and not really for the coming draft, but whenever the mighty young Walker comes out, whenever Johnny Walker comes out, I'm looking for him to be that kind of guy.
Walker is a name that I was thinking of too. I think if there's any UCF player on the roster as of this moment on April 25th, 2024, I got to account for the transfer portal. I think John Walker is going to be the most likely Knight to be selected in the first round in the near future. So, I mean, the good news is that it's a high school recruit, so I think it is a good impact on that standpoint. But I think we're gonna have to wait a little bit before it happens. But the patience will be rewarded, I think.
Okay, got a couple minutes before we're run out of clock on this NFL draft style of a show. I want to go back to this quarterback debate. That exciting? We had 6 guys taken in the first 12 picks, never happened before, including a Heisman Trophy winner that a lot of people think could be a franchise guy. You and I, Kyle, saw the number 2 pick overall up close in person in Orlando.
Yes.
Jayden Daniels from LSU being chased by Florida State's defensive end Verse, who went to the Rams in the first round. Remember I told you I thought he'd be a first-round guy.
I agreed with you.
And, boy, he's proven you correct there. I'm just kind of curious, and we'll wrap it up on this. If you had to put stock and say, okay, of these 6 quarterbacks, I am the most confident that A, this guy is going to be a hit. He's going to be a franchise guy. And B, this guy is going to be a bust. Who would you pick from those 6?
I mean, for me, this is all based on environment, but personally, I feel like you got 2 really big bustable situations here with JJ McCarthy in Minnesota. And also, listen, I think Michael Penix was the most disrespected quarterback going into this offseason. The fraud cons, he will fail. I do not believe in Raheem Morris as a coach. I know he's getting another shot and all that, and maybe he deserves it. I got no problem with it. Glad to see a coach of color getting a second opportunity. That part of it's great, but considering you've got a 4-year deal and they're paying you're paying a busted up Kirk Cousins, and then you get this guy. I don't understand it. But it could be a situation similar to Phillip Rivers and Charlie Whitehurst. I don't know. But, for you way back machiners there for the San Diego Chargers still at that point, right? Everyone else, I'm not prepared to say is going to fail harshly, but, with as many quarterbacks as there are, there's going to be some misses. I like Caleb Williams. The biggest issue I have with Chicago is their coach. I don't think they got the right guy there in that building, but what they're surrounding Caleb Williams with.
Well, and they got the Washington receiver, Odunze.
That was good. Yes, on top of getting Keenan Allen. Granted, he's an older guy, but that's you want a guy who's a talent, who's older, who can teach Odunze and teach also as well Caleb Williams, and for what they've done to the roster to upgrade it. Listen, I haven't been this high on the Bears for a while. I'm not saying playoffs or nothing, but the problem is, let's put it this way, Justin Fields got them to improve enough. They've done it enough to at least be better on paper and have a chance to fight for second place in that NFC North division. I don't see them passing the Lions yet.
I think that out of the ones that I think will succeed, I actually think it's going to be Jayden Daniels. I don't know why, but I have always kind of been a Washington Commanders truther when it came to the NFC East. I don't know what it is.
What?
I feel like the Washington Command, I don't know what it is, but I feel like the biggest thing that held Washington back has always been Dan Snyder. And now that he is gone, I feel like that Washington has enough talent around him that Jayden will be able to come into a team that he doesn't have to run all by himself. He has Austin Eckler and Brian Robinson Jr. in the backfield. He's got Jahan Dotson and Terry McLaurin as his wide receivers, who I think are sneaky good picks. Zach Ertz at tight end, always a reliable face there. I honestly, I would go, if I'm the highest on anybody in this group, at least as a player, I think it's going to be Jayden Daniels. Maybe Caleb Williams will be better in the long run, but I think if we were looking for someone to have a really good rookie year, I'd be looking at Jayden Daniels. And then as far as busts,
they said the same thing as Sam Howell last year, but go ahead.
But I mean, Jayden Daniels isn't really a Sam Howell though, is he?
No.
So as far as busts, you already mentioned Penix and McCarthy. I'm going to go Bo Nix. I think that the Broncos have not exactly been in the best spot, and so I'm going to go with him. I think JJ McCarthy has an interesting supporting cast that he could potentially work out Penix is. I agree with you about Penix, but just to be different, I think Bo Nix could easily be kind of right there with McCarthy and Penix.
The franchise is not in a good space.
So if you
fit with Sean Payton.
So if you're Javon Baker, for example, do you want to be paired up with one of those quarterbacks you guys mentioned? Like give me a quarterback if you're Javon Baker. Hey, that'd be a good fit for Javon Baker.
I mean, not for nothing, but the need they have other than Hollywood Brown for an extended threat, Rashee Rice being in that whole legal situation. Of course, you want him to be with Patrick Mahomes.
Well, it's funny you bring that up. The Chiefs took Xavier Worthy, the Texas wide receiver.
So much for that. But that's where I was going to be.
Yeah. You know what? I'm gonna say Baltimore, and this is why. I think Javon Baker reminds me kind of like a Bateman type of receiver.
Let's hope it's better than Rashad Bateman. It's not panned out well.
True, but I mean the type of receiver that he is, because Baker is a guy that he can use his speed in a variety of ways, and Lamar Jackson is really good with those types of receivers. So I think if I'm anyone, I would definitely go for Lamar Jackson, though he did visit the 49ers, so I put a second on.
Can he be better than Traquan Smith NFL career-wise? You know, Gabe Davis is kind of interesting. Just signed with the Jaguars. Has been up and down. There's a lot of, there's a lot of disagreements on why Gabe Davis was not more consistent in Buffalo. Is he, where would
different style receiver? That's hard to gauge, Elo, because you're going with two larger guys who are meant to be meant to be outside guys. I think Javon's meant to be more of a slot type in this league here too. So more successful. Listen, if he is the third most successful out of those guys, out of the guys we've seen that go back to Traquan, that's not a bad out either. You know,
all right, we'll see what happens. We'll see.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, I would agree. I think Gabe Davis could be a very interesting comparison, to be honest, because I think I saw one comparison to him as I was kind of looking at his draft stock, because you can see the speed comparisons between the two. But you're right. I think Javon is more of a slot than a vertical. So
maybe he'll have Mike Hughes covering him and score 4 touchdowns and get a lot of money a couple years after that.
He had an exhibit in the NFL Hall of Fame I saw when I covered Tony Baselli's induction for the 3-point conversion.
Oh, what a name drop that is. And what a great way to end the segment. The clock has run out. We did actually cheat. We went a little bit longer than probably had planned, but that's okay. It's football talk. Y'all like football talk.
Just celebrate the playoff win, Elo.
That's true. Yes. That is Kyle Nash. All right, Kyle, tell everybody what you are working on here.
Hey, listen, in the meantime, check out those draft previews and such here that's coming up. And hey, listen, forget about what I'm working on. Congratulations to Eric Lopez for calling his 600th softball game. Eric Lopez, you are officially a legend, sir. Thank you so much for pulling that off. What you do for the community, what you do for me personally. The first guy who gave me his number when I was covering UCF stuff, Eric Lopez, to get me taken off. So if you have a problem with what I do covering UCF, it's kind of Eric Lopez's fault. But that being said, congratulations, my friend. And until next time, everyone, class dismissed.
That is Kyle Nash with a segue to softball there. We got to go to softball now. He just set it up on a tee there.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you to Kyle Nash. We'll obviously keep you updated on the draft and where UCF players end up on blackandgoldbanneret.com. Let's turn to softball. Yes, I did call my 600th UCF game on Wednesday. UCF swept the doubleheader against Bethune-Cookman. I was bombarded with a lot of surprises. Bryson, you were there. You want to quickly describe it before we move on to this big series this weekend? Because I'm still responding to messages. It's been overwhelming. I don't know if uncomfortable is the right word. It's been a little awkward because people have been bombarding me with stuff, which is great. I just don't usually handle that very well. So I'll let you do it instead.
Well, Eric, considering you have broadcasted 600 softball games number number 599 and 600 proved to be quite special indeed. I think out of the hundreds of games you've seen, have you ever seen a game pick up 52 days after?
No, that was a first. Never have been part of that. UCF did pick up the game and win 9-1, and then a no-hitter by Ava Justman in the second game, which was 600. Ironic, that's like my 12th no-hitter I've called. But the team surprised me with a video from alumni players and the current team and Coach Bear, and they popped it in during the broadcast, and then they replayed it on the field, and I'm surrounded by the team, and they gave me a cake and a lineup card and a card signed by the whole team. So it was very awesome, and it's been overwhelming, the response, and I thank everybody. I've not been able to respond to everybody about that, but that was kind of unique.
I will say, for those listening, keep an eye out on the Black and Gold Banneret YouTube channel, because like Eric said, I was there, and if you know me, if you know me, like I have something in the works. I'm still trying to finish it up while finishing off finals week, so it's taken a little bit. But rest assured, just keep an eye on the Black and Gold Banneret YouTube channel. Something will be up there, should be up there soon on that front, so you can see Eric's reaction on
and my hair is a mess because I had a headset on, and it was crazy.
You could also hear his reaction, like, because I believe the second Bethune-Cookman game is still on demand on ESPN Plus right now. And
yes.
I watched the end of that game, and it was really cool hearing your reaction when when it went over the PA that it was your 600th game.
Yeah, I was caught off. What did I say? I'll be honest, I kind of blacked out.
Oh, as soon as you heard the PA guy say, "Hey, fans," and you just went, "Oh, no."
Yeah.
So it definitely tracks that you were kind of caught off guard at the moment, which, by the way, I think really speaks to your professionalism on this, because you were focused on doing your job, which is the reason why.
We just saw a no-hitter. Ava Justman, although UCF walked him off, and Justman has a second no-hitter in two Wednesdays ago. She shared a no-hitter with Sona Alajan. Meanwhile, she's throwing a no-hitter. To me, that's like a big story. Like, I don't, that's the 24th no-hitter in program history. 8-0. They went on a walk-off by seriously to run rule Bethune, and then all of a sudden, that they announced it, and the team is staring at me, and now I'm like, what do I do? I'm in the box here. Like, I'm just gonna wave. Yeah. It's like, what am I supposed to do? So I mean, thankfully I didn't swear or anything.
Well, if anything, I think that the game happening when it did, because let's remember, this second Bethune-Cookman game that ended up being your 600th career game was not originally on the schedule when this season started. It only came up after the rainout on March 3rd, which means that that what would have been your 600th game, which would have been game 1 against the Oklahoma Sooners, I would argue that this happening the way it did worked out for the work.
Well, what's funny is it was originally going to be the Saturday Oklahoma game, because they added two home games. They added an extra game against North Florida earlier in the year when they played a doubleheader, because teams lost games to weather. And then this Bethune game, like you said, was suspended back on March 3rd. And they reached an agreement to resume the game, and in return, UCF would give Bethune a second game. That's what Bethune wanted in return. Without that, you're right. I would be calling my 600 against Oklahoma, which would have been interesting, unique. We'll get to that, but instead it was Bethune, and I think everything happens for a reason. It's meant to be. I call a no-hitter. Like, what are the odds of that? That's crazy.
It was history. I mean, this week of UCF softball is kind of insane history. And then you have
let's get into that. That's a good segue.
You have the no-hitter. You have your 600th game, and then we have Oklahoma coming to town.
So let's get into that. The 3-time defending national champion Oklahoma Sooners are going to be here. It has been this series has been sold out since literally the start of the year. It is senior weekend, by the way. 11 Knight seniors will be honored. So it's going to be historic from that standpoint. Probably the most decorated senior class in UCF softball history, okay? Oh, by the way, it's Oklahoma's last Big 12 road series as a member of the Big 12. They're going to be basically at home the rest of the time. Let me start with this, Bryce. And I've been thinking about this. And I'm going to come off Homerisk a little bit here. So that's why I want to ask you.
If anyone's earned it, Eric, it's you.
I would argue that playing Oklahoma, UCF hosting Oklahoma, there has been no UCF sports team that has hosted a bigger dynastic program at the time that they played them. Not like, hey, this program was great 20 years ago and they're playing them now or whatever. I'm saying at the moment, because Oklahoma right now has been on a 10-year dynasty. They're trying to become the first college softball team ever to go 4-peat this year. and UCF is going to play them. I don't think UCF in any sport has ever played a team that's won the defending back-to-back national champions, let alone a 3-time back-to-back-to-back national champions. I think this is the biggest opponent that any UCF team has played in as far as to their sport. Like, for example, men's basketball hosted Kansas this year. That's as big as it gets in college basketball for UCF at home. Biggest home opponent ever. But this Kansas team is not on the mix, hasn't won 2 straight national titles. In fact, they didn't even get to the Sweet 16 this year. Football's biggest, I'm not even sure what the biggest home game, like the comparison I made to some people is, can you imagine, Bryson, if UCF football this year hosted Georgia, who's in the mix, who's going for a 3rd straight national title this year, right? Or the Nick Saban Alabama teams that were going for a 3rd straight national title team. Now, volleyball, in their finale, you and I were there against Texas. Texas was the defending national champions in volleyball, and they would go on to win a 2nd straight national title as a result. That's right up there, in my opinion. Women's soccer has hosted North Carolina, but that wasn't the dominant 2-3 straight North Carolina teams. Where do you fall on that?
Well, I have a couple of other ones that I want to run by you on this that I kind of thought of when you immediately said biggest program and that type of thing. The very first game in the bounce house against the number 6 ranked Texas.
I think that's the biggest football brand that UCF has hosted. The word hosted. Obviously, they've played at Alabama, they've played at Florida, they've played at Georgia, etc. I'm talking on campus at home. You're right. I think you're right. I think football-wise, it's Texas. But remember, that Texas team, I believe, only went 9-4. It was 2 years after the national title with Vince Young. That's what I'm saying. That's what makes this so unique.
Well,
like we may never see this again.
The second one, women's basketball hosting UConn for conference matches.
That's right. Now the question: which years? Pick the years and see how they did that year when UConn came down to Orlando. That's a very good choice, right? UConn, but was UConn in the mix of a 2-3 straight national title run like this Oklahoma team, or were they like really good but not like national champion good? I don't remember. You can look that up here while I kind of continue this conversation. But the point is, this is historic. I don't know if we ever will see UCF play a team that's going for a 4th straight national title, or at least in the middle of it. So I think that's significant. Obviously, Oklahoma is a favorite. They're a juggernaut. They are the best. Them and Texas, I think, are the 2 best teams in the sport. UCF's going to have to play a really clean game, pitch very well, keep the ball in the park, keep the extra base hits to a minimum, and they're going to have to hit with runners in scoring position. That has been a bugaboo for them at times. It was again last weekend in Baylor when they struggled offensively and only scored 1 run in 3 games. They had opportunities but did not score. I'm going to give you this stat, Bryce, and I've been doing some prep for the broadcast. You realize UCF this year has lost 9 games by 1 run. 9 games. 5 of them have been in the Big 12.
Man.
They've lost 14 games by 2 runs or more. 9 of those 14, Bryson, have been in the Big 12. Think about that, Bryson. They're 10-11 in the Big 12. 9 of the 11 losses have been by 2 runs or less. You know what it reminds me of, Bryson? You and I were at Football Media Day, right? What did Gus Malzahn say was going to be the key to the football season in the Big 12?
How you do in close games.
Bingo. And football struggled in that, right? They lost a close game to Baylor, lost a close game to Oklahoma, lost a close game to Texas Tech, lost a close, you know what I mean? I feel like softball is going through the same thing. They're right there at every game. There's only been 2 games to date that they lost by 5 runs or more, and they just haven't been able to get over the hump for whatever the reason. Not the right hit, clutch hit, etc. That's been the kind of year for this team. I don't know if it's a snake-bitten team or whatever you want to describe it, but that's why they're at where they're at right now, which is 28-18, RPI in the mid-30s, KPI, I believe, in 32, 33. I'll double-check that as we go to Oklahoma. But now UCF's got Oklahoma at home. Can they break through and make this historic win against Oklahoma, or are we going to see more of the same? I think will be the big question this weekend in Orlando. And then they'll finish Big 12 at Iowa State.
So I think honestly, if there was any team that you could put on this, and I would say this team could beat, Oklahoma would be very interesting because this senior class, like you said, has done a lot for this softball program. Jada Cody and Shannon Doherty are both Order of Pegasus, which of course is an award, most prestigious award the university can give out to any student at all, regardless of athletes at all. Sarah Willis and Chloe Evans have come in and really become like added to the pantheon of pantheon. Jasmine Williams, of course, as well. Her story has been very well documented. That's not to mentioning the young faces of Aubrey Evans, Samantha Ray, Sierra Humphreys. Like this team is such a clash of like, it's almost sort of looking like in Greek mythology of like the Titans and the gods to get together on one team. You have the new faces coming, like I mentioned, and then you have the old faces that are going to be going out. And I think if you put them against Oklahoma on senior week, if there's a time where I think UCF could beat Oklahoma, like if you said UCF versus Oklahoma, like at any other time, I think 9 times out of 10, I would say Oklahoma was going to cream them. This weekend, though, in this environment, with this team, I think it has the most likely chance to be that 1 out of 10 times that UCF would beat this, like in the Plex with this team at this time. By the way, I did look up with that UConn, by the way. The last time that UCF women's basketball hosted UConn was on January 16th, 2020. And at that point, UConn had been to the Final Four in every year since 2008, which included 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 national championships.
That's really good. So I would say it's UConn, those UConn teams, and then this Oklahoma softball team, maybe the 2 biggest brands that UCF has hosted in the mix of it. I think the men's side will say it's Kansas for basketball. I think it's bigger than Texas football-wise. Let's throw in baseball, by the way. About 20-some years ago, baseball hosted LSU. That was a big brand in baseball. I want to say that was probably the biggest baseball brand they've hosted. Florida, obviously, they've hosted FSU, etc. But LSU, they hosted, I want to say, in the mid-2000s, Bryson, I think. But I don't think it was the Skip Bergman type of LSU teams that was winning national titles left and right. But those are some of the notable big brands that they've played. Like I said, women's soccer's hosted Dorrance in North Carolina. They did recently in 2017. But you make it very compelling. I think UConn, Gino Auriemma, UConn, Patty Gasso. Patty Gasso, by the way, the head coach of Oklahoma, 7 national championships, 2 wins away from 1,500. Oh, if she wins a national title this year, she ties the legendary Mike Condrea with 8 national titles in softball. The 4 winningest head coaches in the history of the sport have now, after this weekend, will have coached at least 1 game at the complex. So that's pretty cool. With Carol Hutchins of Michigan, Mike Condrea at Arizona, and Patty Gasso, and then the Weekleys at Tennessee. Those are some iconic names. A lot of the big name head coaches have coached. Patty Gasso is probably the biggest name that has never coached at Orlando at UCF. That will change this weekend on that front. But the pitching's got to be good. I think you're going to see a lot of arms this weekend. Can they keep Oklahoma below their average? And then I'll give you the stat. In the 10 Big 12 wins, Bryson, UCF's averaged 7 runs a game. In the 11 losses, they've averaged 1.7. 1.7. But I want to say one thing before we move on to baseball. Legendary senior class, as decorated as it gets. I would argue you've got the greatest right fielder in UCF softball history, Chloe Evans, senior. You have Janisha Rowe, who's been fantastic at center field. In the mix there as one of the best center fielders ever to this point. Kennedy Searcy, who's been, unfortunately, has had so many injuries this year. It's limited her. But I remember, Bryson, we had her, top 70 all time in our top 100 female athletes of all time?
Yes. Yes, I do remember that. Yeah, I would definitely unfortunately, she hasn't been able to show it off as much this year because
her and Jazz. And we haven't brought that up, and that's not an excuse, but this team has had injuries that have hurt them. Kennedy and Jazz both have missed a lot of time. Kennedy's missed most of the year. Jazz injured her wrist and hasn't been the same offensively. I think that's also contributed to some of those close losses. What if you would have had both of them healthy? Maybe that changes a couple results.
Very true, very true. But again, they were still contending with young faces like Samantha Ray, Sierra Humphries.
Well, that's the future. Ray, Sierra Humphries, that's the future. But obviously, Jada Cody and Shannon Doherty have combined. They have been part of 179 UCF wins throughout the run. The winningest two UCF players of all time is Jada Cody and Shannon Doherty, who are up in the record books in many categories. Well, I might write a column on the two of them maybe at some point, either after this week or down the road, because I think they've had a significant impact on these programs.
Oh, yeah. I still remember back when the COVID year first happened, because that was the first time I had met Shannon Doherty. I was a young journalism student at UCF, and I did a story about the extra year happening. And that's when I met a young Shannon Doherty who had to basically wait another year before taking up first base from Jasmine Esparza. And I still remember talking to her, and that interview has really stuck with me ever since because of that extra year. That's why it's happened. I mean, it's happened, and because of this extra year, the development they've had during that time, we've been able to see some amazing moments out of that. Jada Cody, I think, is definitely one of the best bats this program has ever seen, and Shannon Doherty, I would argue, has been one of the most clutch players that UCF softball's ever seen. That Georgia, it's like, speaking of you calling 600 games, that Georgia one might have been one of your best calls right there. I mean, that was like that moment right there. Shannon Doherty will be a part of UCF lore forever for those moments alone. And so this is going to be an amazing series to be able to say goodbye to them. I feel like that this is almost the most iconic, dynamic offensive duo at UCF since, I would argue, the very beginning, right? I think Steph Best and Shinhoster right there. I think we haven't had a dynamic offensive duo quite like those two since.
I agree.
I think these two are on their level, if not surpassing them, given the competition.
They passed them in wins. By the way, the 4-year seniors for UCF, Mike Kennedy and Katie Burge and others, 167 wins. This is the winningest senior class ever that's won conference championships. In fact, every player on the UCF roster that's played at least 1 year on UCF, not counting the freshmen and this year's transfers, have all won at least one conference championship and have all made it to a regionals. That's impressive, Bryson. Can they make it a fourth in a row? Still a lot of softball to be played there. Do they have one more magical moment left at the complex? Because many of them have made many great moments. We'll see if it happens this weekend against Oklahoma.
Hey, I mean, if this group of Knights have proven anything to me, is that they are capable of magic at any time. There was the regional 2 years ago, the American Conference tournament. You and I were there. We thought they were out, but they came back and ended up winning the whole tournament. Still an amazing experience to be at. And what's funny is that I feel like this year we haven't quite had a moment like that quite yet. I wonder if maybe they're just saving it for arguably the moment they might need it most of all against a team like Oklahoma.
Should be interesting. UCF Oklahoma, Friday, Saturday on ESPN Plus. Friday, 6 Eastern, Saturday, 2 Eastern. I'll have the call with Alex Powers. Sunday, make a note, 11 a.m. Eastern, ESPNU. Pam Ward, Jenny Dalton Hill will have the broadcast, not me. It's a national broadcast, so I will be, hanging around maybe with the outfield people, the left field lounge.
Twitch stream? Question mark?
I may try to push something for that. We'll see. Got some other things in the works.
I find it so ironic how, like, one of the biggest series in UCF softball history, and unfortunately you wouldn't be able to
call the senior day.
Call the senior day celebration. Yeah.
It's the first time I would not have called a senior day since 2008.
Man,
I missed a senior day in 2008 because it conflicted with a Magic playoff game. How ironic. And that time I made money covering the Magic games, shooting video. UCF did not pay at the time, so I went to the Magic game. things have changed since then.
One of the coolest things about like you coming 600 is with 600 games is that keeping track of like, because obviously you've missed a few games during that streak, and so this isn't like a complete 600 game streak. No. This is like you got to keep track of how many games you missed. The fact that
and the reason I only found out about the 600 recently was because of the no-hitter a couple weeks ago, because people were asking me how many no-hitters I've called. And I was looking it all up, and I have a note where I keep track of all the games I'm doing. And I'm like, wait a minute. Oh, wow. Close to 600. There it is. 600 is on this date. So that's kind of again, it was kind of flukish on that. So we'll see. Should be an incredible scene. Sold out. Should be packed. We'll see what happens. If we count correctly, we might have some record crowds. Hopefully a fun day. Like you said, hopefully you're right, Bryce. Hopefully they got an upset written all over them. All right, let's turn it over to the other sport, because that's not the only big series this weekend. Over at John Juliano Park, UCF Baseball will host Cincinnati. It's not the American, though. It's the Big 12. But this is a big series, isn't it, Bryson? Baseball 8-10 in the Big 12, tied for 10th. A game back of a logjam of teams at 9-9, including the Bearcats. Well, this is a big series. We were there with Rich Wallace. UCF took care of business against Florida Gulf Coast 10-3. So I think they got that, kind of that bad taste of that Central Michigan loss that Friday night gone. But where are we with UCF baseball here against Cincinnati?
Well, this is going to be a really big series, because this is the series that Rich Wallace foreshadowed would mark the return of Andrew Sundin after he's been out with injury. And I'll tell you what, over the course of these last few series where the team sort of hasn't looked like itself, it feels like it could have used a bat like Sundin in the system, especially with the close losses they've had against West Virginia. I think Sundin was sorely missed. And so for him to come back now, if he does come back this series, would be a major boon for this UCF offense that could easily need as much help as it possibly can get, because the pitching, which is looked pretty great over the start of the season, has kind of started to show some cracks. Chase Santala, who took a baseball to the ankle at the end of the game, ever since then his pitching has been a little off. So hopefully he can recover from that. You have Ben Vespi, who has done all right on Friday, but of course he's shown a bit of struggle there. Wiley Hartley had an oblique injury, from what Rich Wallace told us, so he was out, and we mentioned how he fits so well as a Sunday starter. So we'll see what his situation is going into Cincinnati. So given how like tenuous the pitching situation is a little bit in terms of health, this UCF team is going to need its bats to be able to be on all cylinders and step up. And so if you can get Andrew Sundin back, that would certainly be a major help in that regard. And you really want to try to get back into Big 12 play great after that sweep of those losses against West Virginia, which I think UCF was in all those games.
They were. It was a crazy series back and forth, but this is a swing series. And again, it's important to note, college in baseball, the Big 12 has 13 teams. 10 make the conference tournament. So you want to be at least in the top 10. But if you're UCF, even though your metrics are very good right now, they're 24 in the RPI, 22 in the KPI, which is a new metric that the committees are looking at, which kind of it adds the value of margin of victories and things like that. I'm not going to kind of bore you with those details. So those are good, but they're 8-10 in the Big 12. And what's interesting, Bryson, I've learned this from just talking to people that follow college baseball closely. The baseball committee puts more emphasis on weekend results and what your conference record is versus softball. Softball doesn't put as much weight on series as they do just the overall body of work, and they don't really consider conferences. They don't, teams that have been below 500 in softball get into the tournament all the time as far as in conference record. Baseball, if you're below 500, you're in jeopardy of missing the tournament. If you're a 500 or better in a very strong league, which the Big 12 is number 3, normally you're good to go to be in the tournament. D1 baseball has UCF as a 3 seed in Winston-Salem, of all places, with Wake Forest as a host. Wow, a flight. What a concept.
Oh man, that is. I'll explain this later, but that sounds so funny to me, given what else has happened on UCF.
Sure. Softball is in the Gainesville Regional, but according to D1 softball, Tallahassee could also be in the mix in softball. Tallahassee also could be in the mix for baseball. Let's be fair on that. But point is, every game matters here, Bryson. And I think they got to win the Cincinnati series. Cincinnati does not have a great RPI. They're not going to be a NCAA tournament team. Houston is struggling. They go to Houston later. They're not an NCAA tournament team. And then Baylor, they're not an NCAA tournament team. I think UCF's got to win at least 2 of those 3 series to feel good about their chances and make the tournament for the first time since 2017. I don't bring up Texas because that's going to be a big series, the last home series. Texas on the bubble for the NCAA tournament. Some have them in. I think D1 Baseball did. So important games ahead for baseball.
Well, here's something that I think is going to be interesting because you mentioned conference record. Let's not forget that UCF has not swept a series since Samford at the beginning of the year. All those series wins they have gotten against Big 12 opponents have all been winning 2 of 3. They've always lost 1. And so even though the series they lost by getting swept, like Oklahoma and West Virginia are 2 of the top 3 teams in the Big 12 via rankings right now, and they still contend against West Virginia. So, but those 1 losses against each of the other Big 12 teams almost feels like a death of 1,000 cuts type of scenario when you look at the record right now and see UCF at 8-10, even though they're winning more Big 12 series than they are.
Well, and very good series. Oklahoma State is a team that's in the mix to host. They beat them 2 out of 3. Kansas State, they beat 2 out of 3. That's a bubble team, NCAA tournament type of team. Texas Tech, they won 2. Those are good resume wins on the weekends. They also have a midweek against Florida. Again, baseball doesn't they don't put as much stock on midweeks, but still, it's nice to have that win. What's kind of disappointing from a UCF standpoint is you beat Miami, but Miami's having a terrible year. They may not. I don't think they're even going to make the tournament at this point. Man. They're under 500, so that's not a quality win.
Yeah.
But to your point, Bryson, you don't face as many quality opponents on the back end, which means you got to avoid losses and, more importantly, series losses.
Yes, I think honestly, the biggest thing, the big bugaboo that UCF needs to shake off its back over these last few weeks is they need to pick up a sweep. They haven't swept. They've only swept
because that gives you a cushion. That's going to give you an extra cushion. You're right.
Exactly. I think Cincinnati and Houston in particular, I think do offer potential opportunities for a sweep.
Maybe even Baylor. Baylor's not that great. Maybe.
Yeah, but it's on the road. Yeah, but it's on the road.
Houston's on the road.
Yeah, but Baylor's like a legacy Big 12 team, though.
The legacy card. There you
go. I think that you need to at least sweep one. I
agree. If you can sweep one of them, it gives you more wiggle room, and go 6-3, and those three series, you're in good shape. You're in great shape at that point. Or 7-2 would be, I think, pretty much put you in, and then and then Texas, you take your chances against Texas. You can beat Texas. One thing I want to give Rich Wallace, I think, and his staff's done a masterful job, Bryson, building this roster. I was talking to Steven Branco, who's on the broadcast with me on Tuesday when I filled in to do baseball because Mark Daniels was hosting the Swords Awards. But they've built they've had injuries. You mentioned Sundin has been out. Hartley's been out. 23 new faces, but they've built depth. And I asked Rich about that. You can hear that on the post game on our YouTube channel. Bing. But think about the catching position. You lose Sundin, you think you're in trouble, but they grabbed 2 catchers, Bryson, out of the portal, who I think have been an unsung heroes to this team. And I think that's been the same thing in pitching. They've built a team with depth and experience. Like Jack Siska has been a fine at right fielder. Experience, knows how to win. He came from Notre Dame. Prevesk has been fantastic at left field. This is a solid team with experience. And again, depth, which we haven't, honestly, I don't think we've had depth the last few years, which maybe has been a part of the downfall in missing the tournaments at times in the past.
Let's not forget, of course, the rise of Braden Calise mid-season. I mean, like his story is amazing to me.
And AJ Nessler, by the way, the Pitt transfer, who always I think has brought a spark in the leadoff spot.
Yeah. Oh, yes, exactly. Andrew Estrella has also been a very good bat in the system, even if he hasn't been batting like as often. He's been very great as a pinch hitter. Like this, I was very caught off guard by how deep this UCF team is, to the point where like legitimately you could have several different position battles if you were really thinking about it. But you mentioned the catchers. Danny Mirai in particular is one of those players that is always a danger. He doesn't do it all the time, but he's always a danger of getting a big hit. And Dylan King did a fabulous job stepping up when Andrew Sundin was hurt. When I was watching, like he's definitely gotten some hits and some runs. I don't think he was really in a position for as far as clutch performances like Danny Mirai has been in, but he's managed to do his job really well, and that's what you really need on a team like this. And oh yeah, speaking of depth, they managed to throw out a new relief pitcher by the name of Tyler Kozera, and man, the heat that he had on his pitches, man, I'll be interested to see if Rich will throw him more over the course of the season, because he definitely need that bullpen depth.
That's still my question is, you've used Santala and Kramer a lot on the back end. Santala looked a little off in the Florida Gulf Coast game. Look, he was wild, not finding the strike zone. My concern is, if those guys get overused, Najir Victor, they'll pitch a good inning in relief. I hope that's a positive. He's kind of quietly pitched last couple of appearances, been pretty good. Boy, if they could get him right there with Bauer, that could be big difference to this bullpen. I think they're, give you credit. When Rich made the hire, the pitching coach, you liked it a lot. You thought that'd be a difference maker.
Oh, I did. Like the coach, honestly, the biggest criticism I had over the previous regime has been the pitching and the injuries, just everything that has to do with the pitching. But Drew Thomas coming in like he has been in this position before. He has worked with College World Series level pitching staffs. And the what he's been able to do in just one off season with this team is a marked improvement from before. Now, to be fair, it's not perfect, but again, it's only 1 year. If you give him time to work, I can see a lot of improvement from this. I mean, you look at Tyler Kozera, I feel like he has he could end up being one of those people that ends up getting drafted early. Like he has the stuff for it, I think, even if it's just looking at.
No, I agree. I agree. So
I
agree.
Huge. I think he's arguably one of the most. It shows you, I think, Rich knows the people to hire, because not only did he go out and find a really good pitching coach for this scenario, but he held on to Ted Tom from the previous staff, which he didn't have to do that. But if there's one thing that worked really, really well during the Lovelady era, it was hitting. And so he kept around the guy that was responsible for that. And lo and behold, not only is the hitting still going well, but it's improved. They're not as reliant on the long ball as they once were. But of course, they're still dangerous to do so. But they're not as reliant on it as they were last season. So they've even improved on that department as well.
I like this team. I think this team is a tournament team. I really do. I like this team a lot. But they got to win this. I think this Cincinnati series, we're going to learn a lot. I think, Bryson, if they win this Cincinnati series, I think they're going to be fine the rest of the way. And I think they're going to take care of business. And I think they're going to be in the NCAA tournament for the first time in 2017, Bryson. You may have to make some travel plans to figure out how to watch them in the regionals up close in person. So, because you've covered this program since 2021 nonstop, I think you should try to make the effort to see this team play in a regional in person if possible. And hopefully they can do that.
Well, I have summer classes, but if they're still in Florida, then if they're in Gainesville, then I would definitely want to be sure I'm out there for that.
So UCF Cincinnati this weekend at John Uliano Park. It's going to be an amazing weekend of UCF athletics on campus. But we now know, Bryson, as we wrap up, there's some UCF teams that have the NCAA tournament ahead of them. Some golf and tennis news. Tell us about the latest in golf and tennis.
So the country club sports, as we kind of like to call them, have now had their Big 12 championships. Women's tennis was able to pick up a win against Kansas, but unfortunately were met with the dynamo that is Oklahoma State, who, by the way, all of their players ended up being on the Big 12's all-tournament team in women's tennis. I mean, how do you have one team's members of your all-tournament team? Anyway, they were faced with them and they lost, which left them at 11-12, which means that unfortunately they cannot make the NCAA tournament. But, that's a program that has certainly had its struggles over the course of this season, a very tough schedule, and they had a great run. They almost made it to the NCAA tournament. They had to be 500 or better. They almost made it, not quite there after being just met with a dynamo of a team. So well done, women's tennis, on a well-done season. Sophia Pioli actually managed to defeat the number 15 ranked player in the country in that matchup against Oklahoma State, which puts her in an interesting spot. She could potentially get selected for the NCAA singles championship. We'll find out next week if she did enough to do that. As for men's tennis, unfortunately, they had a not quite so good a draw in their tournament. They had to face host Oklahoma State in their first round, and that was a team that they beat 4-3 at home. So they were a tough team to begin with. And unfortunately, they ended up losing in the first round, but they managed to do enough over the course of their season under first-year head coach Lloyd Bruce Burgess. They end up finishing their season at 18-5, which I think should be good enough to make the NCAA tournament. So we'll see where they end up. They haven't learned their fate yet. Men's golf ended up their first Big 12 championship in men's golf, and they ended up kind of pulling up in a little bit back of the pack. Men's golf has certainly had its struggles over the course of this season. Very young, very teams dominant by new faces. They ended up not finishing last, which is certainly good. They finished 13th out of 14 teams against TCU. But then we have women's golf, and that's kind of the headliner here of the country club sports. They go to their first Big 12 championship and at Hockley, Texas, and it was definitely a struggle at first, but Sandwich Sutherland was able to maintain some consistency, and it was able to finish in the top 10. But the story of the tournament ended up being Jess Baker, senior Jess Baker, in her last conference championship. She ended up setting a new Big 12 championship record by finishing with a 64. That is 7 under par, 7 birdies, no bogeys in that round to shoot her up into the top 10 ahead of Sasutham, and ended up making the all-tournament team. That is a record. That is the lowest single round in Big 12 championship history. So first year in the Big 12 Conference Championship for women's golf, and they're already in the record book alone. One of their members is already in the record book alone as one of the lowest single round. To comparison of that, Bryson DeChambeau, who many people will remember from the PGA and Live Golf, he hit a 64 in the Big 12 in men's championship once upon a time. So well done, Jess Baker, on an amazing day of golf. She always seems to surprise me sometimes. I flash back to the time she won the women's amateur championship in 2022. You can hear her reaction to that news. I asked her about it on the Black and Gold Banneret YouTube channel, but that was after we found out where the women's golf program will be going for the NCAA Regional. That's right. They have made the NCAA Regional once again. This seems like a regular occurrence for this program. This is the 7th consecutive NCAA tournament that the women's golf has made, and they're going to be going to Bermuda Run, North Carolina, which is hosted by Wake Forest. That's why Eric, I laughed at the notion that perhaps we could see UCF go to a regional at Wake Forest, because women's golf is actually going to be going to a Wake Forest hosted regional already. We already know that is the case. They are the 5th seed in that tournament, but they will actually be joined there by South Florida. For those that don't remember, last year in the Palm Beach Gardens Regional, USF joined UCF for that one too. So for the 2nd consecutive year, both teams on the sides of I-4 will be going to the same regional in Bermuda Run. It's going to be very interesting to see what they do. The women's golf had a very electric fall. But after the fall season, Pat Pinnen, Tanrata Pinnen, who's I would argue is one of the best pure UCF golfers they've ever had. She ran out of eligibility, which means she could not play this spring. So they've had to bring up true freshman Katie Poots into the starting lineup. And ever since then, it's been a little bit of, I wouldn't say bad. They've been managed to maintain their status as a top 25, top 30 program in the nation, but they haven't really been blown me away in the same way that, they were in the fall. That said, they still managed to make it to a regional. As I mentioned, Jess Baker could easily end up getting a historic making round just out of nowhere. Molly Smith, even despite Molly Smith, despite the struggle that she's had recently, she's still a very talented freshman. If she ends up finding her swing, I could definitely see her making a big impact. And then sandwiched to suit them, she has become the consistent leader. She's been the pillar of consistency on this team. I think if they are able to all put together really good rounds, hopefully we'll end up seeing UCF make it to the NCAA championship for the first time since 2019, because despite how good this women's golf program has been over these past several years, they've only ever made the championship, I think, twice, the last time being in 2019. So I will be very interested when they go up to the Bermuda Run, North Carolina in the first week of May, or May 6th through 8th, if I'm remembering right, if they might be able to break that streak and be able to make it back to an NCAA championship.
We got to wait till May 6th through the 8th.
Yeah, no, they have time. They got to make sure to have time to prepare for this sort of stuff. They got to make, arrange travel plans and all that type of stuff. And I'm very excited. I'm very excited to see how these regionals end up shaking out, because I've said this before, and you and I have talked about this, Eric. Women's golf is now the first UCF women's team that's in the Big 12 to make an NCAA tournament. Now, granted, golf is a little bit different from the other sports in that they don't really follow a conference schedule like everyone else. But
you had women's golf on the women's side. Then what? Men's tennis is going to be the first men's team to make from a Big 12.
Yes.
Remember, men's soccer's in the Sun Belt. That's pretty remarkable stuff.
Oh, yes, it very much is. But yes, May 6th through the 8th, the Bermuda Run, North Carolina, hosted by Wake Forest. That's found that funny when you mentioned Wake Forest earlier. But yeah, women's golf is back to another regional. The big thing for me is going to be, can they make it to the NCAA championship? Because they've made regionals like 7 consecutive tournaments. They've made a regional. They have been a pillar of consistency, and that's why I think Emily Marin is probably the most underappreciated coach at UCF at all, because she's gotten them to the regional like with consistency every time. Her big bugaboo has been getting to the NCAA tournament.
Well, it's getting over that hump. It's easier said than done.
It is. You're right. It's very hard. Golf.
And the problem is, some of it is not even in your control, because you could play a good couple days, but if another school just shoots better than you, the course better than you, what are you going to do?
Exactly. And so essentially looking at this team, sandwich to suit them has been the model of consistency. Jess Baker, if she is able to take that momentum from that last round of the Big 12 championship and take that with her into the regional, this is her senior year, by the way. So this is it for her. And so if she takes that momentum into this last one and manage to join sandwich and have a good round, and then Molly Smith also rebounds from kind of been a bit of an offspring for her. She was electric in the fall. If those 3 golfers are able to string together 3 really good rounds, then I think UCF will have a very good shot at making the championship. So I've been very high on this women's golf team over the course of this season. So this is time, this is their moment to see if they can kind of live up to that hype.
So the regionals will be that May 6th through the 8th window. Men's tennis, we expect this upcoming week, will be selected to make the NCAA tournament. When does the NCAA tournament start in men's tennis?
So
that could be the fun.
So the men's tennis selection show is going to be on Monday, April 29th at 6 p.m. Eastern time. And the championship will get underway on May 3rd through 4th for the first and second rounds of competition. So yeah, it's a quicker turnaround from the selections for.
I'll tell you, that's going to be wild because you got men's tennis NCAA starting that weekend of May 4th. You got women's golf in the regionals during that week. That's also the same week of the Big 12 softball championships in Oklahoma City. Black and Gold Banneret will be at Oklahoma City. Since I don't know when the next time we're doing a podcast, we've all been a little busy. I'm just going to say that now. More details to come on that down the road. But we're going to be covering that. And, oh, by the way, that's the same weekend that baseball hosts Texas. I think it's going to be an exciting week.
Let's put it this way. I am very glad that I am in the break between the spring and summer semesters for this.
Should be wild. All right, well, that's going to do it for this edition of the Night Shift. Thanks to Kyle Nash for joining us. Thank you, Mr. Bryson Turner, for producing. I'm Eric Lopez. We'll hope to do this again soon. I know we haven't been on as frequent on podcasts, but quite frankly, real life gets in the way sometimes. I'll leave it as that. We've all had different things to take care of that's a little more important in real life stuff. Nothing serious, just, life stuff. That's all I'm going to, various things. So, but we're still putting up content on blackandgoldbanneret.com. We're going to finish with a splash here at the end of the first year of the Big 12 for all these teams down the stretch. So, for Bryson Turner, I'm Eric Lopez. We hope you've enjoyed this edition of Night Shift.